For those of you that don't know me, my name is Shakar. I'm primarily known as a teacher of traditional Chinese martial arts, and I've been doing this for a very long time. I've been training in the traditional Chinese martial arts for just over 20 years, and I run a school called Kung Fu Zone, where I teach two main systems of Kung Fu. I teach the Tiger Crane combination system, and I teach the Shuangyang White Crane Tai Chi system. Something that some of you don't know about me is I have trained in a number of spiritual traditions throughout my life, starting very, very young. I've always been searching for answers to the big questions of existence. And I train in the Chinese martial arts because I see them as a path to growth in that direction, in a spiritual direction. Now, I have a number of students who often ask me about my thoughts on spiritual matters, my experiences in different traditions, and it doesn't often fit in for me to talk about it in a regular Kung Fu class. Not everybody is interested in that part of the training. And again, I can't really take 40 minutes or 30 minutes to talk about a specific idea or concept in a class that's an hour long itself. So I've decided to put my thoughts down in this recorded format for anybody interested in that side of things. The first tradition that I was trained in from a very young age was back where I'm from in Kurdistan, northern Iraq, and it's the Sufi tradition. Sufism being the mystical side of Islam, just like Kabbalah is the mystical side of Judaism, and arguably Rosicrucianism is the mystical side of Christianity. Sufism, if I'm putting it down into one sentence, is the tradition of achieving enlightenment through divine love. And I want to discuss and talk about this tradition and its approach to enlightenment on this first recording. Sufism is a very poetic religion. They love poetry. They love storytelling, because a lot of the ideas are very difficult to be understood with the mind. So they use allegory, they use poetry to be able to appeal to a different part of our understanding. So the way I've recorded this is I've put together a little allegorical story to explain love as the path. And what I've done is I've recorded a chapter of the story and then try to break that down and explain what that means and how that fits into the overall path. I hope you enjoy it. Please let me know what you think. Please subscribe if you like this kind of thing. As I say, I won't be just doing recordings on spirituality and other ideas. I also have Kung Fu posts and educational stuff. If you want to explore the traditional Chinese martial arts, I've got an online course at shaolintaichi.online. You can check it out. You get a 2-week free trial. I'm teaching the whole Shuangyang White Crane Tai Chi system over a number of years. Check it out, see what you think. And yeah, I hope you enjoy this. A young man, disillusioned with what life has offered, opens his door and walks out of his home and into the wilderness. He is mentally fatigued and spiritually lost. He can hear the pleasant sound of the stream flowing peacefully by his side. He closes his eyes and points his face towards the sun. The warmth of the sun bathes his skin. The cool breeze passing through, refreshing him. Everything is as it should be. Why then is he not content? He plucks an apple from the apple tree he is passing. The apple tastes nice, as he expects. But even this does not satisfy him. He searches inside himself. Why does this pleasantness around him not satisfy him? Nothing seems to last. The taste of the apple is fleeting. When the apple is finished, the happiness from the taste also ceases. Every time a cloud passes in front of the sun The pleasure he feels from the feeling of the warmth on his skin also disappears. Is this all there is? He asks himself. Why am I so dissatisfied? The young man continues to wander aimlessly. He is roused from his introspection when he catches the whiff of a perfumed scent passing in the air. He's never smelt anything so fragrant and sweet. He stops to smell some more. He wants to know where it came from. He looks around and sees nothing and nobody. But the scent lingers and urges him to follow. He follows a little more, allowing the scent to guide him. The scent leads deeper into the wilderness, into an area he has not been before. He is afraid of the unknown, but equally curious. He is mesmerized, needs to find the source. His search has begun and will take as long as it takes. All spiritual paths must begin where we are, in the material world of duality. The I is not content and recognizes that something is missing. We feel a deep longing to fulfill this hole at the center of our being. Initially, we attempt to fulfill this void or dissatisfaction by filling it with what we think will bring us contentment. We seek to acquire money so that we can acquire things like a bigger house and a nice car, give our children what we didn't have. In essence, we are seeking status, to be recognized and celebrated by our peers and to be idolized by those who look up to us. But like the taste of the apple or the warmth of the sun on our face, the happiness derived from these things are fleeting, and we need to look for the next fix. This seeking must continue until we recognize that the longing that we are trying to abate is half of what we are seeking in the first place. In the beginning, there was nothing. This nothingness cannot be conceived of by finite minds, as we are limited by the dual nature of our subjective reality. Just as the inhabitants of Edwin Abbott's two-dimensional flatland cannot comprehend the height of anything in their world, we also cannot comprehend the nature of this nothingness that was at the beginning, preceding the emergence of time and space, that eventually gave rise to our minds. This nothingness was all that existed, so we will simply call it the All. The Hermetic tradition asks us to consider that the All, for reasons beyond our comprehension, began to stir. It wanted to gain insight into self and understand itself. Being the totality of everything, the All contained the potential for all things. It contained the potential for an infinite number of minds and an infinite number of experience. The All decided to create, so that it can experience and gain insight into all. But how can something that is all create? Can it get materials and tools and create something external to itself? How can this be? If it is all, there are no tools external to itself. There are no materials external to itself, and there is no space external to itself to create into. Can it reproduce and beget offspring? To create from itself, the all will need to divide itself and no longer be the totality of all. There also needs to exist space outside of itself for its offspring to exist in. The only choice that remained was for this infinite mind to gaze into itself to gain insight into the potential of all things. As it gazed into itself, it saw reflected back an infinite number of reflections, each reflection reflecting a further reflection and all other reflections. The all continued to follow these reflections further and further inside until this infinite mind became fragmented, like a schizophrenic with multiple personalities, each one not recognizing the other one as part of the overall mind that they reside in. In its fragmentation, the all was lost in a multitude number of reflections, narratives, and timelines, forgetting its original nature, but at the same time feeling the deep longing inside for union with its original nature. The journey of the mystic is simply the journey of mind, fragmented and separated from what it has become to what it once was, back to its original nature. The mystic, unlike the layperson, recognizes that this longing is the vehicle by which the original nature of mind is calling her back to the source. The mystic does not aim to push the feelings of longing away by attempting to satisfy it with inconsequential things like possessions and status. The mystic embraces longing and the empty chalice it leaves in the heart by looking to find the wine that it is really a container for. After walking in the wilderness for a time, the young man is tired and is left wondering why he left all that he knew to follow a scent. The scent had now faded, and he was lost in an area he did not know. Should he cut his losses and try to find his way back? Just as he is about to give up, he picks up the scent again. But now, it is even stronger and much closer. He can't give up now. He continues to follow the scent until he comes across an oasis. On the other side of the oasis, he sees her, kneeling by the side of a lake washing her hair, in a flowing red and yellow dress. Her long black hair flowing down into the water like an obsidian waterfall, her skin glowing and her face divine. The young man cannot contain himself. "I found you!" he shouts. His journey is at an end, he thinks to himself. She looks up nonchalantly, and for the briefest moment, their eyes meet. The young man drops to his knees and cannot move. His heart sings like a nightingale. He has fallen for her. He wants her. He needs her. He must have her. She calls out to him, "Who are you?" He responds with excitement in his voice. "It is me. I have been searching for you. I am in love with you." She stands up, turns around, and begins to walk away. The young man screams and shouts, asking her to wait mean nothing. They are carried by the wind until they are no longer. He watches her disappear into the distance, becoming smaller and smaller. He wipes his eyes from tears of joy and then tears of loss. She has gone, leaving in her place an emptiness, a longing that only she can fill. In our dualistic nature, love must exist in two aspects. Love in its masculine form tells the beloved, "I love you. You are mine." It is active, direct, and outwardly projecting. It is represented by the Taoist yang that arises out of the emptiness of Wuji. In its feminine form, love is the empty seat of longing. It tells the beloved, "I long for you. I am yours." It is empty, devoid of self, and drawing inwards. It is represented by the Taoist yin, still and empty. The relationship between the mystic and the divine that she seeks must be a balance of this feminine and masculine aspects. For the mystic, the path back to original nature is in the feminine aspect of love. It is the longing, the emptiness waiting to be filled that takes us back to the all. Standing before the divine, we must all embrace our feminine nature. Man or woman, young or old, we cannot fathom the immensity of the infinite, let alone consider limiting its aspect into our finite ability to love. We can only wait in subservience and devotion, ready to receive from the great masculine. This division between the masculine and feminine aspects of love helps resolve a dilemma faced by the mystic. This dilemma is articulated nicely by Sheikh Abu Sa'id Abul Khair when he writes, "Until you become an unbeliever in your own self, you cannot become a believer in God." The word illusion is used a lot in mystical circles, as it is important to discern the truth from the projection. The underlying illusion that all other illusions stem from is the illusion that I am. We all believe that the real us exists locked up somewhere in our bodies, controlling our actions, thoughts, emotions, etc. We say things like, I have a body, I have a soul, my heart and my mind. And the deeper we go, the further this I runs away from us. To believe that we can love in its masculine aspect implies that there is something here that can do the loving. It is looking at the reflection of the moon in the well and watching as the well falls into the illusion that it is embracing the whole moon. If the path of the mystic is to recognize that she is a mere reflection, how can a reflection do anything, let alone love in an active way? The answer is it cannot. At this early stage on the path, the well can only begin to understand that it is in reality not embracing the moon. It can only act as a passive container, waiting and longing for the next time the moon decides to shine down and reflect off of its surface. The mystic will for a long time search for his beloved, trying to find her, tame her and make her conform to his will. This way of searching will always be futile and will always lead to dead ends and frustration. The mystic will then, weary from his search, find that his attempts are leading nowhere. How can a reflection of the moon shine like the moon? With this insight, the next stage comes. The young man, drunk on love, makes a decision to not go home. His life is forever transformed. He must hatch a plan to find his beloved and possess her, make her fall in love with him, make her his for eternity. He continues to follow the scent, wandering deeper into the wilderness. He can't find her. He asks every tree he sees, "Have you seen my beloved?" He tells every rose he sees, "You pale in comparison to my beloved." He embraces every animal he sees, full of pity that they have never had the fortune to be in the presence of his beloved. Everywhere he looks, he feels the absence of his beloved and the longing deep in his soul to just see her one more time. No longer the young man that set out of his home all those years ago. The old man has made a home for himself in the wilderness. When he picks up the scent of his beloved, he follows it. When the scent dissipates, he rests where he finds himself. Over the years, he has developed patience and a serenity that comes with the consistent longing. He no longer tries to push the pain of his beloved's absence away and no longer grasps at the joy that arises when he catches her scent. They are all different shades of his love for his beloved, and what arises from the emptiness at his core will eventually fade back into that same emptiness. So that we can understand our place in the universe and function in society, our minds perpetually work to solidify our subjective view of reality. One way that this happens is we give external things and events intrinsic value that it does not have. We add our own judgments to experience, believing this judgment to be inherent to the thing or event we are experiencing. These judgments lead to either clinging or aversion to the things and events we experience. We decide what we dislike and what we like. We spend our lives sliding between these two states that we have created for ourselves, firmly believing that the feelings we have towards an experience is inherent to what we are experiencing. This way of viewing the world is an illusion, a trick our mind plays on us so that we can feel a sense of control over experience. The judgments that we pass on experience are not inherent to those experiences. Our judgments are the mind's way of creating distance between us, the subject of experience, and the thing we are experiencing, the object. The things we decide are good, we grab at and bring closer to ourselves. The things we decide are bad, we develop an aversion to and push away from ourselves. Consider a slice of rhubarb pie. Some really enjoy the taste and get pleasure from eating it. Another person may eat the same pie and not like the taste. The person who enjoyed the taste will feel that the nice taste and pleasure he experienced from eating it is inherent to the pie. And the person who didn't enjoy it will feel that the bad taste and disgust that he experienced is inherent to the pie. The truth is that neither is the case. Our judgments and feelings towards all things originate from us and not the things we are passing judgment on. The mystic, having achieved a high level of insight arrived at through their journey, will begin to see the inherent emptiness in experience. At first, recognizing their own aversion and grasping at things and events, but later, achieving a level of equanimity that cannot be shaken by any experience. The mystic accepts the current state of experience without passing judgment on it. She observes and is present in the midst of all things, people and events, without labeling them as good or bad. One afternoon, the man is thirsty, so he follows the sound of running water. He has been out in the wilderness for so long, he has become an expert at finding what he needs when he needs it. He follows the sound of water until he arrives at a stream. Approaching the stream, he bends down to get a drink. As he draws his face close to the water, he sees his own reflection. He does not recognize himself. The young man who left his home is no more. He sees an old, grey-haired man looking back at him, beard long and unkempt, eyes weary from years of looking for his beloved. My journey has been fruitless and my life wasted, he thinks to himself. As he is looking into the reflection of his own face and reminiscing about the choices he has made, it begins to rain. He can feel the raindrops falling on his head and can hear the sound they make as they hit the stream. He looks up and gazes at the raindrops one by one hit the stream and are no longer. His eyes suddenly brighten, his back straightens and a smile appears on his face. Before long, his laughter can be heard echoing through the valley. He cannot contain the joy that comes from true insight. He gets up from his crouched position by the stream, begins walking aimlessly and laughing to himself every now and again, as if he suddenly remembered the punchline to a very funny joke. How many times have we heard the phrase, the battle between the heart and the mind? This dichotomy of different ways of experiencing the world is not unique to one cultural outlook or a single religious belief. This conflict of experience is rooted in how we have evolved as human beings. It surprises many when they initially begin to consider reality and their experience of it, because there exists reality as it is and reality as our subjective experience. For us to survive, our brains develop neural pathways and brain hemispheres that allow us to create patterns, connections, and relationships with how reality enters our sphere of experience. This part of our brain is designed to deal with the universe in a rational, pragmatic, and logical way. We created language so we are able to label our experience of our universe, dividing our experience of reality and putting it into neat little conceptual boxes so that we can feel like we understand and therefore have mastery over it. The role of this part of our brain is not to understand things as they are, but to understand things as we are. A master is sitting with one of his students and points to a cup that is on the table before them. The master asks, "What is this?" The student replies, "A cup?" The master says, "No, it isn't." The student, confused, asks the master, "Well, what is it then?" The master picks up the cup and throws it at the student, hitting him hard on his forehead. As the student is rubbing his forehead from pain, the master says, "That's what it is." As soon as we name a thing, we have conceptualized it, and as soon as we conceptualize a thing, we limit it. In our subjective experience, the thing we have labeled ceases to be everything else it is and can be. If we take the cup, when does it cease to become a cup? If we remove the handle, is it still a cup? If we break it in half, is it still a cup? Cup is a label and a concept, a subjective view of a reality that is far greater. If we zoom into the cup far enough with a microscope, we see atoms. Is it still a cup? If we zoom in even further, we see empty space. Is it still a cup? If we zoom out of the cup far enough, the cup disappears and we see the house it is in. Zoom out even further, the house disappears into the country it is in. If we continue to zoom out, we can get to a point where all that is visible to us is the Milky Way galaxy. Is it still a cup? Now consider the cup going backwards in time and forwards in time. If we go far enough backwards, the cup ceases to exist. If you go far enough forwards, the cup ceases to exist. Experiencing reality with logic and reason is important for us to be able to function in society as it currently is, but it is an experience of the universe that is limited by our current point of view in time and space. The mystic must bypass the logical part of her brain, put it aside and begin again. The metaphorical heart must be the window that she looks out of to experience reality. The circumventing of her logical mind is an important step that takes her from understanding concepts to gaining insight into reality. Koan practice in Zen Buddhism, mantra practice in Hinduism, dhikr practice in Sufism, and even psychedelic use in shamanistic traditions are all methods used to help the student quieten their thinking mind and reside in what remains. The student considers the koan or the mantra for a very long time, mulling it over, trying to understand it, deconstructing it, reconstructing it, turning it upside down and inside out in their minds to the point of exhaustion. The student at his wit's end, having made no progress, will suddenly realize that the problem isn't that the koan or the mantra is unsolvable. The problem is their need to solve it. Their need to put it into one of these logical shelves in their mind so that they can claim mastery over it. True insight does not arrive with the understanding of this koan or mantra, this object of their intense concentration. True insight arrives when the student realizes that the distance between the koan or mantra in their mind that they have been mulling over and themselves is non-existent. This is the punchline to the joke that will wake them up and have them in tears of joy and laughter. Reality is not governed by our experience of it or how we define it. Zhuangzi, a 4th century BC Taoist mystic, explained, "The universe is very beautiful, yet it says nothing. The 4 seasons abide by a fixed law, yet they are not heard. All creation is based upon absolute principles, yet nothing speaks." When the metaphorical mind is put to sleep and the universe is viewed from the metaphorical heart, good and evil cease to exist and the mystic arrives at union. Layla, excited to attend the woods outside their village for the first time with her mother, helps her mother gather the clothes and foods they have made ready as an offering. A decade ago, an old man appeared in the woods and has set up home among the animals there. For years, people would go into the woods and sit in his presence, asking for his blessings and his teachings. His eyes bright like they are windows to a blazing sun. Some people would swear that if they stared at him long enough, they would see an aura of bright white light engulfing his body. As Layla arrived at the clearing in the woods, clutching her mother's hand, she noticed many people sat down. People she recognized from the village, and others she did not recognize, who must have made a longer journey to get here. As she scanned the crowd sitting, towards the focal point of their gaze, she noticed the old man, sitting in the center, eyes half open, seemingly unaware of all the people surrounding him. He was sat cross-legged with a big, radiant smile across his face. Every time someone from the crowd would walk up to him to ask for his blessing and put down their offering of food and clothes, the old man would place his hand upon their hands and say, "My beloved, you are here. You have come to me." When a small animal would sit next to him or a bird would land on his shoulder, he would say, "My beloved, I have missed you. You are finally here." In fact, Layla noticed that when the old man would get up and walk around, he would refer to every tree or bush or flower he passed as his beloved. He would spend some time engrossed and absorbed by the thing he embraced and then move on. Layla and her mother walked up to the old man and placed their offerings. Layla's mother lowered her head and began to sob. Through her tears, she pleaded to the old man, "Please, teacher, bless my daughter. She has lost her father and I am unwell. I fear she will end up alone and unloved." The old man stirred from his ecstasy, gazed softly on the young girl and said, "A raindrop hitting the ocean is not separate from the ocean because it does not know it is a raindrop. Just like the raindrop, Layla is not separate from her beloved." With that, he closed his eyes again and went back to his ecstatic state. As the metaphorical heart and mind are no longer in conflict, the distance between the seer and the seen, the subject and object begins to disappear. All that is left is what these projections arise in: consciousness. The ego, or sense of self, is nothing but a narrative, a long train of thoughts that hurries along, jumping from one idea to another. It is self-evident that nothing within our material universe exists that stays the same from birth to death, except this train of thought that consistently comments and passes judgment on all things that it perceives, giving rise to the illusion that the self is a constant from birth to death. The concept of the unchanging self, or the I that we think we are, is an illusion. Even though the sense of self that we have is so deep-rooted and apparent, on closer inspection, when we go searching for this I, we see that there is nothing there. The I that we think we are is just an emergent illusion of the collaboration of the different processes going on. The mystic, having reconciled the heart and mind, no longer partitions and conceptualizes things in the logical mind so that they make sense in the conventional way. All things are received as they come, and the object of her search permeates all things. The mystic inquires, if there is no self, who is searching for the beloved? And if there is a beloved, beloved by whom? The world becomes a stage. Saint and sinner, young and old, rich and poor, are all projections of the beloved. Attraction and aversion no longer remain. There is no space left for such frivolities. Only love for the beloved remains, and an amazement and awe at the vastness of his reach. Layla, much older now, gathered the food and clothing together, ready to pay her regular visit into the woods to pay her respects to the holy man who had cured her mother of her illness after the blessings all those years ago. Her mother had passed away last year, but had lived a lot longer than expected. She liked to leave early in the morning, before other pilgrims had set off. On this one occasion, as she arrived at the clearing where the holy man lived, she noticed it was empty of the usual crowds. Even though it was early, she still expected some people to be there. She looked around for the holy man, but he was also not at his usual seated position. She decided to sit and wait for him. Maybe he was bathing in the lake and didn't want to be disturbed. After some time, she noticed footsteps behind her. Excited to see the holy man, she quickly turned around. She saw before her a young lady about the same age as her in a flowing red and yellow dress, her long black hair flowing down her back like an obsidian waterfall, her skin glowing and her face divine. She seemed to look through Layla, as if Layla wasn't there, to a place behind her. As Layla looked in the direction she was looking, she saw the holy man lying on the floor, clutching his chest. Layla gasped and ran to him. He was gasping for air, his eyes as radiant as ever. As the young lady approached the holy man, Layla moved out of the way. The young lady lowered herself to kneel next to him. She clasped his hands with both of hers, and they locked eyes. The holy man's eyes began to well up with tears, and a smile appeared on his face. Through his gasping for breath and the obvious pain in his voice, he asked, "Is it time? May I come now?" Layla knew he didn't have long and couldn't bear to watch him suffer. She knew what was coming. She placed her head in her hands and began to sob. The young lady, still kneeling next to him and clutching his hands, smiled at him and replied, "Who are you?" The holy man took in one last breath, looked at his beloved and exhaled, "I am you." With that, the holy man stopped breathing. Layla took her eyes from her hands and looked up to see the holy man and his beloved had gone. She stood up and looked around. There was no one. Where did they go? She thought to herself. She started to walk deep into the forest to see if she could find them. It was already evening and it was starting to get cold. She decided to go back home. But just as she was about to turn around and head home, she catches the whiff of a perfumed scent passing in the air. She has never smelt anything so fragrant and sweet. She stops to smell some more. She wants to know where it came from. She looks around and sees nothing and nobody. But the scent lingers and urges her to follow. Mansur al-Hallaj, the 19th century Persian mystic, is famous for his statement, "I am truth." I am truth being synonymous with I am God. He ended up imprisoned and executed for blasphemy and apostasy. The statement was considered by many as heresy. It was seen as al-Hallaj claiming divinity and elevating himself to the level of God. But as a mystic, al-Hallaj was no more before the God he worshipped. He had recognized that he was a mere reflection of his beloved, and he had removed all trace of his own identity. Mansur al-Hallaj had never existed, and any identity he previously had was an illusion and was burned away in the fire of his longing for his beloved. There was no one here left. There was no one here to acknowledge. All that was left, all that there ever was the divine. Mansur al-Hallaj had become a true unbeliever in himself, thus understanding the true nature of the divine. In the end, we must all find our way through the myriad reflections back to the source. How can there be a lover and a beloved? How can there be anything outside of the all? In recognizing this, the mystic is set free from the shackles of self. The burden of her existence is left behind, and she understands that all things are a projection of the all. In this final stage, the mystic, at the peak of her intoxication and love for her beloved, like a moth spinning around the candle flame, spins closer towards the center with every turn until she is consumed by the object of her desire and she is no longer. Just as when we wake from a dream full of different characters, realizing all the characters were us all along, the all awakens from its introspection and creation is reversed back to its source.